Before I get into the meat of the presentation, I just wanted to start off taking a moment to thank a few people. First, I want to thank the entire school board and especially President Chris Ampatron for proposing and supporting the idea of forming an outside citizens budget advisory committee. I'd also like to thank David Locker and Vice President Jeffrey Hasty, who sat on the committee with us in an advisory role. Without their knowledge of the school system and their occasional redirection of our efforts, we would have been spinning our wheels. I want to especially thank Carol Amarello, who represented the district, and she provided a significant insight into the various aspects of school operations. Personally, I think she was the MVP of the group, but we ran out of time. We didn't get to vote on it. Finally, I'd like to thank my colleagues on the committee, Mary Monzone, Suyan Taylor, and Ed Ackerman, for their incredible contributions and also for letting me speak first tonight. It's been a pleasure getting to know all of you and working with you. Just very briefly, there were three broad objectives laid out for the group. Try to identify some cost savings for the budget year that's coming up. Recommend a presentation format that might add a little bit of clarity and information to help the administration allocate resources, to help the Board of Education make suggestion about resource allocation, and importantly to get more community engagement so that the people of the community have a better understanding of what's in the budget and how resources are being allocated. And then thirdly, of course, recommend that this continues because we had a great time and learned a lot, and we think it was a very productive use of our time. And so we have some suggestions for what something like this might look like going forward. Before getting into all the numbers and the fun stuff, I just wanted to spend a moment talking, about what is a budget and why is it important. A budget is not just a document that has a bunch of revenues and expenses, and you try to make them match, and then you fill up the expense lines, and you hope it all works out in the end. The budget is actually an incredibly important tool for resource allocation for the administration and the board to use. It should be a tool that helps us plan for the long term, especially now that we're in this new period with a tax cap. And it also should be a budget, a document that serves a marketing function. This should be an opportunity for the administration and the Board of Education to be discussing with the community what are our goals as a school system. And so we really need to have a document here that engages everybody and builds up a robust discussion of how we're allocating our resources. And saying how we're allocating our resources, just so we're clear, is not code for let's cut everybody but the teachers, because of course parents, you always hear the parents saying more teachers, more teachers, more teachers, but I also want clean bathrooms and I want grounds that are beautiful and green. I want the garbage collected, I want the schools safe. There's a lot more to the school system than the teachers, although the teachers are obviously crucially important. So getting to the potential cost savings, this presentation does not encompass everything. So I would encourage the board very strongly to read the report in its entirety. There's a lot of meat there. We're going to try to keep this short so we're not here all night. One of the things we wanted to talk about was changing the budget process to target this year's upcoming budget with actual historical spending. This school administration, it appears to us, has had a practice of creating a budget against the budget that we're in or against prior year budgets, and the actual spending doesn't always match the way the budgets have played out. And you should all know that this is not something that is specific to the New Rochelle school system. This is something that goes on all over the place. But it's not the best way necessarily to create a budget, because you can end up having line items that get inflated over time when, if in one year it's a little bit too high, and then the next year you put growth on top of that, and then growth on top of that, and then before you know it, you have a budget that's quite a bit variant from what the actual spending is. So, one of the largest areas in the budget where this has taken place is in the employee benefits line. And we summed up 5 years of budget history. You can see that we over budgeted in this line item by $21 million cumulatively. That does not mean that $21 million went missing. It means that $21 million was there available to be spent on other things, and it was spent on other things. It was spent on capital investment It was spent on various miscellaneous things that pop up during the year. It was spent on substitute teachers and things of that nature. But when you're creating a budget and people are getting concerned about how the resources are being allocated and people are fighting over resources, it's good to know what the actual intended expense will be so that we can free up funds from a place where they're not going to be used and be allocated accordingly. And I would point out here that Mamaroneck went through this process, and they have a much smaller budget than we do. And they freed up $1.4 million from their budget, which they reallocated to other areas. And you know, they had over budgeting in a lot of the same areas where we have over budgeting. So again, these are sort of things that just kind of grow naturally if you don't change the practice that you're engaged in. Getting more to some hard cost savings. One of the things that came up during the review was that we have a very heavy use of hourly non-course staff. These are people that come in to fill in if somebody is out sick or not available, or we just need extra staffing requirements. And it's really a very large use of hourly employees. We believe it was over 300,000 hours per year. And as we looked at some other school systems, it looks like we're being a little bit overly generous in the wages that we're paying. So, you know, the first suggestion for the school system is that we could slowly start bringing back the wages to get more on par with what some of the other school districts in our region are paying. And of course, if you multiply 300,000 hours by even a small number, you get a lot of savings. So this is, aside from the changing the practice of budgeting, this is probably the biggest item, so that's why it's at the front. Next, we have a suggestion that we take some of the department chairs that we have and we reposition them. We have 7 department chairs. 6 of them are doubling up subjects, 1 in the middle school, 1 in the high school. And so, and they also teach a partial course load. So what we're suggesting to the administration to look at is to take 3 of those and turn them into full-time, 100% department chairs to cover grades 6 through 12. And that would free up 3 other people who, from my understanding, have teaching experience, and they would just go right back into the classroom. This doesn't cost the school system anything, and you know, net of the periods they were already teaching, it adds about 1.5 teachers to the school system. There's a page in the budget that has a long list of outside contractual services. We're making a recommendation to the board and the administration to do some of those things in-house. There are things in there like drain repair and flooring, wood floor sanding that we think our own staff could do. There may be some cases where we might have some staff members that would need some additional training. That would be fine. But we'd like to see a lot of these things done in-house if possible. We'd also like to see a separation of what's an ongoing maintenance expense from what's more of like a capital project. So we'd view a sidewalk repair as a capital project, blacktop as a capital project, but putting chemicals in the pool, that's a maintenance item that would happen every year. There's also, among the many lines in there, there's a miscellaneous line for $200,000. And there were already so many things in there, we think that we can get rid of that line and reallocate the $200,000 elsewhere in the budget. So that's another recommendation. Finally, associated with this part in the budget, there's a supplies budget. And the supplies budget is up 28% from 2 years ago to the upcoming year. And that's despite the fact that the actual dollars that we're spending on the people to do the services is down about 20%. So if we just brought the assumed spending on supplies for this section back to what we used to spend, even though we seem to be using fewer services, that would pull $130,000 out of the budget for reallocation into other areas. And this, you know, that's a perfect example of budgeting to actuals instead of budgeting to budget. Okay, now I'm going to hand it off. I've spoken long enough to Ed Ackerman, who's going to talk about the presentation of the document and improving its clarity. Thank you.